What would you do if one quiet morning at your child's grave you suddenly heard two strangers calling her their sister? David Harrington, one of the richest men in the city, came to the cemetery to visit the grave of the daughter he lost 3 years ago. He expected silence, just like every other visit. But that morning, something was different. Two small twin boys were kneeling beside the grave. They placed flowers on the stone and whispered, "Please take care of our mom in heaven and our sister Lily." David froze. His daughter had no siblings, or so he believed. When he asked the boys why they called Lily their sister, one of them looked up and said something that shattered his world forever. "Because our mom told us the truth before she died." And when David heard their mother's name, his heart nearly stopped. Maria, the woman he once loved, the woman he abandoned years ago, the woman who had been hiding a life-changing secret. Standing there in the cemetery, David realized something terrifying. These two boys might not be strangers at all. They might be his sons. But what the twins revealed next about their mother's final wish will break your heart. Stay with me until the end, because this story will remind you that sometimes the family you think you lost was waiting for you all along. Welcome to Heroic Stories Hub. This is the place where powerful stories come to life. Stories of heartbreak, shocking secrets, forgiveness, and life-changing moments that stay with you forever. If you believe one story can change the way we see the world, you're in the right place. Subscribe now and join Heroic Stories Hub, where every story has a powerful lesson.
Wait, what? David Harrington suddenly stopped walking. Two small voices were coming from his daughter's grave. His heart pounded violently in his chest. The cemetery was supposed to be empty. It was always empty this early in the morning. David had chosen this quiet hour for a reason. No reporters, no business calls, no people asking favors from one of the richest men in the city. Just silence, just memories, and Lily. He slowly lifted his head and looked toward the grave. There they were. Two small boys, twin boys, both kneeling in the grass beside Lily's gravestone. David's breath caught in his throat. They looked about 7 years old. Their clothes were simple and worn. One boy held a small bunch of wildflowers that looked like they had been picked from somewhere nearby. The other boy had his hands folded tightly together as if praying. David felt something strange twist inside his chest. He had visited Lily's grave hundreds of times, but no one had ever been here before. No one. He stepped closer, his expensive shoes crunching softly on the gravel path. The boys didn't notice him yet. One of the twins gently placed the flowers on the grave. "They're not as pretty as the ones in the flower shop," the boy whispered. The other twin shook his head. "I think she'll like them." David's eyes narrowed slightly. His heart was beating faster now. The boy who had placed the flowers looked down at the gravestone and touched the carved name with his small fingers. "Hi, Lily," he said quietly. David froze. The second twin took a shaky breath. "We came to see you again." David felt a strange chill run through his body. Again? The boys continued speaking as if Lily could hear them. "Mom said you were very kind," the first twin said. "And she said you had a big heart." The other boy wiped his eye quickly. "We wish we could have met you." David's confusion grew deeper. His daughter Lily had died 3 years ago in a terrible car accident. She had been only 10 years old. Since that day, David's life had never been the same. His company kept growing. His wealth kept increasing, but inside, he had never stopped feeling empty. And now two strangers were kneeling beside her grave, talking to her like they knew her. David slowly took another step forward. Then he heard something that made his blood run cold. The first twin bowed his head. "Please take care of our mom in heaven." The second twin whispered softly, "And please watch over our sister." David's entire body went stiff. Our sister? The words echoed in his mind. Our sister. That couldn't be right. Lily didn't have siblings. She was his only child. David suddenly stepped forward. "Excuse me." The boys jumped in shock and quickly turned around. Their eyes widened when they saw the tall man standing behind them in an expensive black coat. "We're sorry, sir," one of the twins said quickly. "We didn't mean to touch the grave." The other twin grabbed his brother's arm tightly. "We'll leave if you want," he said, scared. David stared at them silently. Something about their faces made his chest tighten. Their dark hair, their bright eyes, something felt strangely familiar. He cleared his throat slowly. "That's not what I asked," he said, seriously. The twins looked at each other nervously. David pointed toward the gravestone. "Why did you call Lily your sister?" The boys froze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. A soft wind moved through the cemetery trees. Finally, one of the twins looked up at David again. His voice was quiet but certain. "Because she is." David felt like the air had been knocked out of him. "That's impossible," he said immediately. The second twin swallowed nervously. "Our mom told us the truth before she died." David blinked slowly. "Your mom?" he asked, unsteadily. The twins nodded. "Yes." David's thoughts began spinning wildly. This didn't make sense. None of it made sense. "What is your mother's name?" he asked slowly. The twins hesitated again. One of them rubbed his hands nervously. Then the older twin finally spoke. "Her name was Maria." The moment David heard that name, everything inside him stopped. Maria. The world around him seemed to fade away. He stared at the twins as memories flooded his mind. A small cafe, a girl with warm eyes, late nights laughing together, promises he never kept. His hands began to tremble. "You said Maria?" he whispered. The twins nodded again. "Yes," one said gently. David's chest felt tight. His heart was pounding louder than ever. Years ago, Maria had been someone very important in his life, before he became the powerful billionaire everyone knew today, before the fancy cars, before the giant mansion, back when he was just a young businessman chasing success. Maria had worked as a waitress in the cafe near his office. She had always smiled at him, always believed in him, and for a short time, they had loved each other. But then something had gone terribly wrong. The last time he saw her, she had told him she was pregnant. David believed she was lying. He thought she only wanted money. They had argued. He had said cruel things, and she had disappeared from his life. David's hands shook harder now. He slowly looked down at the two boys again. "How old are you?" he asked quietly. "7," one of them answered. David's heart skipped a beat. 7, the exact number of years since Maria had vanished. A terrible realization began forming in his mind. He struggled to breathe. Where is your mother now?" he asked slowly. The twins looked at each other again. Then the younger one looked back at David. His eyes filled with tears. "She died last month." David felt his legs grow weak. "How?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The boy wiped his face. "She was very sick." David stared at them. The wind rustled the leaves above them. The cemetery felt colder somehow. And then the younger twin said something that completely shattered David's world. "Before she died, Mom told us to come here," he said quietly. David leaned closer. "To this grave?" he asked. The boy nodded. "Yes." "Why?" David asked. The twin looked down at the gravestone again.
"Because Lily is our sister." David Harrington stood frozen beside his daughter's grave. Two unknown boys were kneeling in front of him, calling his dead daughter their sister. And suddenly, for the first time in years, David realized that the past he thought was gone forever might still be standing right in front of him.
The name Maria echoed in David Harrington's mind like a distant thunder. For a long moment, he could not move. He stood beside Lily's grave, staring at the two boys as if the world had suddenly turned upside down. Maria, the woman he had once loved, the woman he had pushed away. His hand slowly gripped the cold stone of the gravestone to keep himself from collapsing. You said your mother's name was Maria?" he asked again, his voice barely steady. The twins nodded quietly. "Yes," one of them answered. David swallowed hard. His throat felt dry. "Maria Alvarez?" he asked slowly. The boys looked surprised. "Yes," the older twin said. "That's her name." David closed his eyes for a moment. Memories rushed into his mind like waves crashing against the shore. Maria laughing while pouring coffee. Maria sitting across from him in the small cafe booth. Maria looking at him with hope in her eyes. Then the final memory came back, the night everything ended. "David, I'm pregnant," Maria had told him. He remembered how his heart had immediately filled with doubt instead of joy. Back then, he had just started becoming successful. Money had begun to change him, and fear had changed him even more. "You expect me to believe that?" he had said coldly. Maria had stared at him in shock. "I'm telling you the truth," she had insisted. But David had been cruel. "You just want money," he had snapped. The memory stabbed into his chest like a knife. Standing in the cemetery now, David slowly opened his eyes again. "You said your mother died last month," he said quietly. The twins nodded. "Yes," the younger one whispered. David lowered himself slowly onto one knee so he could look them in the eyes. "What happened to her?" he asked gently. The boys looked down at the grass. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then the older twin took a deep breath. "She was sick for a long time," he said softly. David felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of sick?" he asked carefully. The boy hesitated before answering. "Cancer." David felt as if the ground beneath him had disappeared. Cancer. Maria had been suffering all those years, and he had never known. His fingers pressed harder into the gravestone. "How long?" he asked weakly. "Almost 2 years," the younger twin replied. David covered his mouth. 2 years. 2 years of pain. 2 years of fear. 2 years of fighting a disease alone. While he had been living in luxury, while he had been flying around the world for business deals, while he had been sitting in his giant mansion, the shame burned deep inside his chest. Did she have anyone helping her?" he asked quietly. The twins shook their heads slowly. "Just us," Daniel said. David looked confused. "But you're only children." Samuel nodded. "We tried to help," he said. David's heart cracked hearing those words. "How?" he asked softly. Samuel wiped his nose with his sleeve. "We made soup when she was too tired," he explained. Daniel continued the story. "And we helped her stand up when she couldn't walk well." David felt tears forming in his eyes. The boys continued speaking, their small voices heavy with memories. "Sometimes she would be in a lot of pain," Samuel said. "And we just held her hand until she fell asleep." David looked down at the ground, unable to hide his tears anymore. The twins noticed. "Are you okay, sir?" Daniel asked gently. David wiped his face quickly. I'm fine," he lied, but he wasn't fine, not even close. A terrible thought entered his mind. "Did Maria ever try to find me?" he asked slowly. The twins exchanged another glance. Then Daniel nodded. "Yes." David's heart jumped painfully. "When?" Daniel said. "About a year ago," Samuel continued. "She said she needed to tell you the truth before it was too late." David leaned forward urgently. "What happened?" Samuel took a deep breath. "She went to your company building." David's eyes widened. The massive glass tower that carried his name, Harrington Global. "She waited there almost the whole day," Samuel said softly. David's heart began racing. "But the guards wouldn't let her inside." David's stomach twisted painfully. He remembered the strict security rules he had personally created. No visitors, no strangers, no interruptions. "Did she say my name?" David asked quietly. "Yes," Daniel replied. "She told them you knew her." David felt a cold wave of guilt wash over him. "And what did they say?" he asked quietly. Samuel looked down again. "They told her you were too busy to see people like her." The words felt like a punch to David's chest. People like her. Maria had been turned away from his building like a stranger, like someone unimportant. David clenched his fists. "And she left?" he asked slowly. Daniel nodded. "She cried a little," he said softly, "but she told us not to be angry." David stared at them in disbelief. "She wasn't angry?" he asked, confused. Samuel shook his head. "No. Mom said sometimes people make mistakes when they're scared." David felt completely shattered. Maria was dying. She had come looking for him, and he had never even known she was there. He looked at the twins again. Two boys who might be his sons. Two boys who had lived a life of struggle while he had lived surrounded by luxury. His voice trembled as he asked the question that had been haunting him. "Did Maria ever talk about me?" he asked nervously. The twins looked toward Lily's grave. Then Daniel answered. "Yes." David's heart pounded harder. "What did she say?" he asked quietly. Daniel smiled sadly. "She said you were brave." Samuel nodded. "And she said you were very smart." David looked stunned. "She said that?" "Yes," Samuel said softly. "And she said you loved Lily very much." David looked at the gravestone, his daughter's name carved in stone. "How did she know about Lily?" Samuel answered gently. "She saw the news when Lily died." David felt his heart break again. Maria had been watching his life from far away, even after everything, even after he had rejected her, even after she had raised 2 children alone. "She told us something before she died," Daniel added quietly. David leaned forward urgently. "What was it?" Daniel took a deep breath. Pointing softly at Lily's grave, he said, "She told us we had a big sister." David's eyes filled with tears again. "And if we ever felt alone," Samuel continued the sentence, "we should come here and pray with her." David could no longer hold back his emotions. He collapsed onto both knees beside the boys. For years he believed the greatest tragedy in his life was losing his daughter, but now he realized something even more painful. Because of his pride, because of his doubt, because of one terrible decision years ago, he had lost an entire family. The cemetery had become completely silent. Only the soft sound of the wind moving through the tall trees could be heard. David Harrington remained on his knees beside Lily's grave, staring at the 2 boys in front of him. Daniel, Samuel. The names echoed in his mind. His sons. For years he had believed his life had ended the day Lily died, but now he realized something even more painful. While he had been grieving one child, 2 others had been growing up without a father, right in the same city, right under his nose. David slowly lifted his head and looked at them again. Their small faces were nervous, unsure of what would happen next. "Daniel? Samuel?" David said softly. The twins looked at him carefully. "Yes, sir," Daniel replied. David swallowed hard. "My name is David Harrington," he said quietly. The twins nodded slowly. "We know," Samuel answered. David blinked in surprise. "You do?" he asked. Daniel pointed to the gravestone. "Your name is on Lily's grave," he explained softly.
David looked at the stone. David Harrington, beloved father. The words suddenly felt heavier than ever before. He took a slow breath. "I need to ask you something important," he said gently. The boys listened closely. "Did your mother ever say that I was your father?" The twins looked at each other. Then Daniel nodded. "Yes." David's chest tightened instantly. Samuel spoke next. "She told us the truth when she got very sick." David leaned closer, desperate to hear every word. "What did she say?" he asked quietly. Samuel looked down at the grass. "She said you didn't believe her when she told us about us." David closed his eyes for a moment. The guilt pressed against his heart like a heavy stone. "But she said you were not a bad man," Samuel continued. David looked up again, surprised. "She said that?" Daniel nodded. "She said you were scared." David's voice cracked. "She still defended me?" Samuel nodded again. "Mom said sometimes fear makes people push away the ones they love." David's eyes filled with tears. Maria had protected his image even after everything he had done, even after he had abandoned her, even after she had raised their children alone. "Before she died," Daniel said softly, "she made us promise something." David leaned closer. "What promise?" Daniel pointed gently toward Lily's grave again. "She told us to come here." David's heart pounded. "Why?" he asked quietly. Samuel answered, "She said Lily was our sister." David stared at the gravestone again. The girl he had loved more than anything. The daughter he had mourned every single day. "She told us Lily had a good heart," Daniel said softly, "and that if we ever felt alone," Samuel continued, "we should talk to her." David wiped tears from his face. For years he had come to this grave thinking he had lost everything. But now he realized something incredible. Lily had unknowingly been protecting her brothers, even in death. The twins had come here looking for comfort, looking for family, and today they had found their father. David slowly reached out his hands. "Come here," he said gently. The twins hesitated. Then Samuel stepped forward first. Daniel followed a second later. David pulled them both into a tight embrace, his arms wrapped around them as if he was afraid they might disappear. For the first time in years, he felt warmth again. He felt life again. The boys hugged him back carefully. "Are you really our dad?" Samuel asked in a small voice. David nodded slowly. "Yes," he whispered, "and I'm so sorry." Daniel looked up at him. "Sorry for what?" asked Daniel. David's voice trembled. "For not believing your mother, for not finding you sooner, for letting you grow up without me." The twins looked at each other again. Then Daniel spoke quietly. "We're not angry." David stared at them. "You're not?" he asked, surprised. Samuel shook his head. "Mom told us not to hate anyone." Daniel nodded. "She said hate only makes the heart heavier." David could barely speak. Maria had raised them with kindness, with forgiveness, even when life had been unfair to her, even when he had been the one who hurt her. David gently placed his hands on their shoulders. "Where are you living now?" he asked softly. The twins looked down. "In a small apartment," Daniel answered, "with our aunt." David nodded slowly. His mind was already racing. Years of regret could never be erased, but he could still change their future. "You won't live alone anymore," he said firmly. The twins looked up quickly. "What do you mean?" Samuel asked. David took a deep breath. "I mean you're coming home with me." Both boys froze. Their eyes widened in disbelief. "To your house?" Daniel asked. David nodded. Yes. Samuel looked uncertain. But you were very rich, he said quietly. David gave a sad smile. Money doesn't matter right now. He looked at them with tears in his eyes. What matters is that you're my sons. Daniel's voice trembled slightly. Are you sure? David pulled them both into another hug. I'm more sure than anything in my life. The twins hugged him tightly. For a moment, none of them spoke, 3 broken hearts slowly beginning to heal. After a while, David stood up and looked down at Lily's grave. The stone was shining softly under the morning light. He stepped forward and gently touched the engraved letters of her name. Lily, he whispered, I think you helped bring them to me. The twins stood beside him quietly. David wiped his tears and looked at the sky. I promise you something, he said softly. I will take care of them. I will give them the life their mother wanted for them. He placed his hand on the gravestone one last time. I found them, Lily, and I won't lose them again. The 3 of them slowly walked away from the cemetery together. Daniel held David's left hand, Samuel held his right. The morning sun was rising in the distance, and for the first time in many years, David Harrington didn't feel empty anymore, because in the end, he finally understood something that money could never buy. Money can build buildings, money can build companies, but only love can build a family.